From the macabre minds of Laughing Devil Production comes another story from the Nightshade Diary. You know what that means. Check under the bed and make sure no one or nothing is there. Is the closet door securely shut? Then leave your disbelief behind, amp up your imagination, and hang on tight for another ride into terror and mystery. And like all good horror stories, just imagine it's a dark and stormy night. And remember, screaming like a little girl is permitted.
The Haunted Thames. If tragedies are a cause of hauntings, the Thames should assuredly be haunted, for no river in Great Britain has witnessed more murders and suicides. Is it not possible, however, that there is something in a river that induces tragedies? The old belief that certain seas, rivers, streams, lakes, and pools harbor their own peculiar species of spirits may, after all, be true. I've often felt, when in near proximity to some rivers and pools, as if the water possessed a strange magnetic influence and attraction, as well as sensing the presence of a spirit, sometimes friendly and sometimes evil and inimical. When I returned from ranching in the far west of America, I lived for a year in a small hotel in York Road, Lambeth, then a very sordid neighborhood. I used frequently to stroll of an evening along the Thames embankment. It was in the early 90s of the last century, and on nearly every seat were wretched, down-and-outs, homeless and hopeless. When I could afford it, I gave them a few coppers and chatted with some of them, as I did in the London parks and commons. Several of them told me that they had felt a ghostly presence urging them to end their miserable existence by jumping into the river. And I thought of a picture in the 1860 Christmas number of the Illustrated London News that used to fascinate me when I was a boy. It was by Phiz, and represented a young man leaning over the wall of one of the London bridges and gazing into the Thames. He was in very great trouble. A hideous evil spirit that had apparently risen from the river said, "Come, it's the only way, hasten, save yourself," and beckoned to him with a curved, shining finger. The young man felt impelled to take the fatal plunge, and would doubtless have done so but for the intervention of his guardian angel. Some of the poor down-and-outs who chatted with me may have been saved too from a watery grave by the intervention of a guardian angel, but there were nightly those who, if they had a guardian angel, heeded it not, and yielding to the urging of some demon of the Thames, leapt into the cold watery depths. The spot where Cleopatra's Needle stands was well known to be haunted. None of the outcasts would venture near it. Two of them told me that they saw one night a tall, nude, shadowy figure with a peak-shaped head and a body covered with what looked like scales suddenly appear by the Needle, wave a long arm at them, and leap over the wall into the river. They said that they sometimes heard unearthly groans and hellish mocking laughter in the river. Old Westminster and Waterloo bridges were well known to be haunted at times. Spectral figures were rumored to be encountered on them in the dead of night, and seen leaping from them into the Thames. Suicides from both those bridges were almost nightly occurrences in the early 90s, and more than once I narrowly missed witnessing them. On the morning of October 9th, 1857, a carpet bag was discovered on one of the abutments of Waterloo Bridge. It contained the dismembered body of a man who had been horribly murdered. The toll-keeper of the bridge recollected seeing a woman carrying a bag that closely resembled the one found come to the bridge on the night of October 8th and pay toll money. She spoke in a voice singularly gruff for a woman, and there was something very masculine about her. No one except the toll-keeper had any evidence to offer. The identity of the murdered man was never known, and the crime was assigned to the category of unsolved mysteries. Soon after the finding of the remains, the bridge was rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a headless man who was habited like a sailor. He appeared several nights in succession just above the abutments where the remains had been found. It was thought to be the ghost of the murdered man, whom the police believed was a foreign sailor. Rumors of ghostly phenomena were current for a while in the summer of 1897, after the discovery of the body of a man who had been strangled in the Thames near Karen Wharf, Whitechapel. A postman told me that he and his wife had heard unearthly cries and groans in the river near the wharf, and had seen the figure of a man of huge stature rise from the water, wave his arms in the air, and then disappear. They experienced these strange happenings on 3 succeeding nights. Every few years, stories are in circulation regarding the reappearances of the Richmond Cavalier's ghost. It is a phantom dressed like a cavalier of the days of Charles I, which is seen during the late afternoon or evening prowling about the long avenue on the Surrey side of the Thames, between Richmond and Twickenham. It appears very suddenly, seeming to rise out of the river, and disappears as suddenly and mysteriously. It is alleged to have been seen by several people individually and collectively. About the 60s of the last century, there was an epidemic of demolishing old buildings in London, and among those that were destroyed, some very wantonly, were numbers 2 and 3 West Street. These two houses were very close to the Fleet River, which flowed into the Thames near Blackfriars Bridge. Built by an affluent gypsy, they served conjointly the purpose of a tavern and an inn, which became the resort of fences, robbers, and every kind of criminal. They were sliding panels, secret staircases, cupboards for storing stolen goods, and trapdoors, which afforded a means of escape and of dropping bodies of victims into the Fleet, to be borne speedily by the current into the Thames. Many cruel, dark deeds were perpetrated in the inn. Strangers in London were decoyed by attractive women, confederates of the robbers, to the inn, where they were robbed and murdered. Once within the walls of the inn, there was no hope of escape and no mercy. It was small wonder that stories of ghostly happenings in the inn and in the Fleet were constantly circulated. One night, about the 30s of the last century, a young merchant was walking along West Street on his way home when he heard dreadful groans and saw a woman crouching by the Fleet. He approached her and inquired if she was ill, whereupon she raised a slender white hand and pointed to her neck. There was a gory, gaping wound in her throat. As he gazed at her, immeasurably shocked, a long, bare, fleshless arm rose out of the water and dragged her in the river. Another story is about a clergyman who was going home one night after visiting a sick parishioner, when he heard blood-curdling cries coming from either number 2 or 3 West Street. Considerably startled, he was standing still, wondering what he ought to do, when the door of the house opened and a man and woman emerged carrying a body. They passed close to the clergyman without seeming to notice him, and he was horrified to see the corpse was headless. Bereft of the power to move or utter a sound, he watched them pitch the body into the river. Directly they had done this, they vanished, and the blood-curdling cries were repeated, coming this time from the river. The clergyman hurried home as fast as his legs could carry him. Space will not permit me to relate in this volume anything like all the stories of Thames haunting that I have been told and have collected from various sources. I am only able to mention 2 more. One was told me in 1925 after the publication of my book, The Trial of Kate Webster, which was included in the notable British trial series. After one of my talks on ghosts, a lady told me that when she and a friend were crossing Barnes Bridge one night in 1879, soon after the execution of Kate Webster for the atrocious murder of Mrs. Thomas in Richmond, they both heard a loud splash and saw a woman in black leaning over the wall of the bridge, gazing down into the river. Her face was very pale, her features hard, and her expression extremely forbidding. There was something very sinister about the woman. On them approaching her, she vanished. They told a policeman, whom they met shortly afterwards, about her, and he said, "Oh, several people have told me they have seen the ghost of Kate Webster on that bridge, but attribute it to their imagination. I don't believe in ghosts." It was from Barnes Bridge that Kate Webster had dropped into the Thames a box containing some of the dismembered remains of her victims. The box was subsequently found in the mud on one of the banks of the river. The other story is that of the Thames near Windsor. One afternoon in the summer of 1920, I was having tea with my wife in a shop in Windsor, and I was wondering if there were any hauntings in Windsor apart from those associated with the castle. A gentleman sitting at a table close to us overheard what I was saying, and told us that he knew of a haunting very near Windsor. He said he was walking with a friend along the Windsor to Maidenhead Road one evening, and when they came to a spot near an inlet of the Thames, they heard what sounded like someone calling for help. Thinking someone might have fallen into the water and was in danger of being drowned, they ran to the stream. When they got there, they could see no one, and were about to return to the road when footsteps stealthily approached them, and as they instinctively shrank to one side, they were conscious of someone whom they could not see passing close to them. A moment later there was a splash, as if something heavy had fallen or been thrown into the water. They were very frightened and hastened back to Windsor. They subsequently learned that a few years previously the mutilated body of a girl had been found in the inlet just where they had heard the splash. After the finding of the body, the inlet was widely reputed to be haunted. The narrator of the story said he and his friend had gone to the inlet several times after their ghostly experience, but nothing had happened, and he believed the haunting had ceased, which was probably the case. So many hauntings are only temporary. The Stowaway. Another Thames mystery occurred in the summer of 1803. The result, one of Messrs. Green's fine Australian vessels arrived one day at the port of London from overseas and dropped anchor in the Thames prior to discharging her passengers and cargo. The moment that the former and their effects had been landed, the unloading of the goods in the hold began. Off came the hatches, and down into the hold went the men, shouting, hustling, and swearing, and soon the work of hauling up casks, crates, bales, and packages of all sorts, to be conveyed by cranes or on backs ashore, was in full swing. Suddenly one of the men engaged in roping boxes paused, and shouting to the man working next to him in the hold to look, pointed excitedly in the direction of two huge piles of goods immediately in front of him. "What's the matter, Jim?" his mate asked, thinking he had suddenly gone mad. "Matter?" Jim replied with an oath. "Why, look there!" And he pointed in the same direction, even more emphatically than before. His mate looked, and became excited too, for there, in the gloom, standing upright between the packages, was a strange man. "Blimey!" Jim exclaimed. "Can't you see him? He's a stowaway. Here, come out of it," he went on, addressing the stranger in not at all unkindly tones, for among the poor there is generally much sympathy. "Come out of it. You're in London now, and if you sneak ashore at once, no one will see you." But the man apparently did not hear, for he maintained silence and did not move. Then Jim's mate said he would see what he could do, and approaching as near to the stowaway as he could get, he told him to get out of the hold the way he got in, and to leave the ship while he had the chance. Still there was no reply, and the two men looked first at one another and then at the stowaway in utter amazement. "What's up?" a voice from above shouted authoritatively. "What's up? Below there?" "Nothing," Jim answered somewhat hesitatingly. "Leastways, nothing very much." "What do you mean by nothing very much?" the voice above shouted again. "What's up, I say?" The men stared anxiously at the figure between the boxes. There was no time to lose. "Come, move out there," Jim said softly. "Don't you hear me? Move, I say, or someone will be down from the dock as I'll make you." It was of no use. The threat had no effect. The man remained where he was. "Come, what is it?" the voice from above shouted furiously. "If there's nothing the matter, get on with your work. I can't have this job hanging on till Christmas." "There's no help for it," Jim whispered. "We shall have to give the cove away. He must be stone deaf or a loony." "Someone's down here, sir," he shouted. "What the devil do you mean?" was the angry retort. "I've had enough of all this nonsense. I shall have to settle it once and for all." And the owner of the ship, swinging himself down the companion ladder in a fury, approached the unloaders with an oath. He changed his tune, however, when he caught sight of the man wedged in among the boxes. "Hullo! That's a landsman, judging by his clothes. A stowaway!" he exclaimed. "I shall hand him over to the police. Now then," to the two men, "don't stand there like dummies. Move the goods away, and get at him. Haul him out." "Aye, aye, sir," Jim and his mate chorused, and aided by a third man who had joined them, they set to work at once. They had hardly commenced to remove the boxes that apparently were wedged the stowaway in, when he staggered suddenly forward and fell with a curious sideways movement onto the boards. He was no live man, but a mummified corpse. His identity was never known, and he would speedily have been forgotten had it not been rumored that his ghost haunted the ship and the adjacent shore.